Yeah, I think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. You know, worry or stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. But in terms of, you know, doing the job and things like that, I don't feel too overwhelmed by that. Not now, anyway.
Cameras were already rolling before anyone realized the biggest story of the day wasn't happening in front of them. As Prince William stepped into another high-profile royal engagement, attention quickly shifted away from the ceremony itself. Royal watchers weren't asking what he said. They were asking what his growing role meant for everyone else inside the monarchy. Every appearance, every decision, every carefully planned move seemed to fuel one question that refused to disappear. Was the balance of influence inside the royal family quietly changing? Few moments reveal the changing direction of the British monarchy more clearly than the quiet decisions made behind palace walls. On the surface, another royal engagement ends with the familiar photographs, carefully chosen words, and measured smiles. But beyond the cameras, the balance of responsibility has been shifting. As King Charles continues his reign, Prince William is taking on an increasingly visible leadership role, and every new appearance raises fresh questions about what the monarchy will look like in the years ahead. Royal observers have watched William's responsibilities expand steadily. From representing the crown at major national events to leading long-term initiatives through the Royal Foundation, his public role has become far more prominent. Each appearance seems to reinforce the same message. The future of the monarchy is no longer a distant discussion, it is unfolding in real time. That growing influence has naturally prompted renewed interest in how senior members of the royal family will work together in the years ahead. Queen Camilla continues to carry out her official duties as Queen alongside King Charles, while William and Catherine increasingly represent the next generation of royal leadership. Constitutional experts frequently note that this kind of transition is gradual, shaped by tradition rather than sudden change, but it still fuels widespread public discussion about the future. Hi viewers, if you believe the future of the royal family should always be built on duty, fairness, and accountability, don't just watch this story unfold. Take 1 second to like this video, subscribe, and share it with another royal watcher. Every like tells us to keep bringing you thoughtful royal coverage, and every subscription helps these conversations reach more people who care about where the monarchy is heading.
Not now, anyway.
The job? Well, he's going to be king one day. William telling the reluctant traveler that things will be different under his reign.
I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it. That's the bit that excites me.
Now, let's see why this moment has everyone talking. One reason this subject continues to attract so much attention is that every public appearance is examined in extraordinary detail. Viewers notice who arrives first, who stands beside whom, who speaks during official ceremonies, and who takes the lead during important engagements. While many of these observations are simply part of normal royal protocol, they often become the starting point for speculation across newspapers, television programs, and social media. Recent years have also placed unprecedented demands on the institution. The passing of Queen Elizabeth II marked the end of a historic era. King Charles assumed the throne while continuing treatment for cancer that has been publicly acknowledged by Buckingham Palace. During the same period, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped back temporarily from public duties while undergoing treatment before gradually returning to engagements. Those developments inevitably required other senior royals, particularly Prince William, to shoulder additional public responsibilities. That shift has not gone unnoticed. Commentators across the political and royal spectrum have pointed to William's increasingly confident public presence. His speeches have become more frequent, his international profile has grown, and his work on homelessness, mental health, and environmental issues has received sustained attention. None of this represents a formal transfer of authority, but it illustrates how the monarchy naturally prepares future sovereigns over many years. The relationship between William and Queen Camilla has also been the subject of continued public curiosity. Both regularly appear together at official events and carry out duties on behalf of the crown. Beyond those public appearances, however, reliable information becomes limited. Responsible reporting distinguishes between confirmed facts and speculation. and much of what circulates online about private disagreements or dramatic confrontations remains unsupported by evidence. Even so, the public fascination persists because the modern monarchy exists under constant scrutiny. Every photograph, every seating arrangement.
He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades. Today, I am proud to create him Prince of Wales, to Windsor, Camilla.
Every change to the official diary can generate thousands of headlines within hours. Sometimes those headlines reflect genuine developments. Other times they are simply interpretations of ordinary protocol that take on a life of their own. This growing contrast between verified information and viral speculation has created an entirely new challenge for the royal family. Palace officials work carefully to communicate confirmed news through official statements, while countless unofficial stories spread online at remarkable speed. For viewers trying to separate fact from fiction, the line is not always obvious. As William's responsibilities continue to expand, one larger question quietly remains in the background. What does the next stage of the monarchy actually look like once today's transition becomes tomorrow's reality? The answer is unlikely to be found in dramatic rumors or sensational headlines. Instead, it will emerge through the careful decisions, constitutional traditions, and public responsibilities that gradually shape the future of the crown. And the next chapter begins with one such decision that, while entirely public, reveals far more than many people realized. The soft click of a fountain pen signing an estate ledger cut through the heavy silence of the private study, but the calm was entirely superficial. Deep within the administrative corridors of the royal estate, an unexpected discrepancy in the guest logs had just triggered a silent alarm among senior staff. Prince William sat at his desk, staring at a set of printed security manifests that simply did not align. The entries showed a guest cottage occupied, utilities drawn, and private security detail allocated. Yet no official approval form bore the required signature of the Estate Oversight Committee. For an institution built entirely on procedural precision, an unapproved occupant was not a simple administrative oversight, it was a direct breach of protocol. Across the hallway, the private secretary shifted uncomfortably, clutching a leather-bound folder containing the weekly property records. The atmosphere inside the room grew noticeably colder as William flipped to the previous month's entries. There was no raised voice, no dramatic movement, only the steady, deliberate turn of paper that signaled trouble for anyone familiar with palace routine. The guest in question was no ordinary visitor. It was Queen Camilla's sister, whose presence at the cottage had been arranged informally, quietly, and without the standard clearance channels that govern royal residences. To the household staff, it seemed like a minor family accommodation, a polite gesture extended behind closed doors. But to the office responsible for maintaining strict boundaries over royal property, it represented something far more complicated. William looked up from the documents, his expression unreadable, as he requested the complete records for every guest residence on the property over the last 6 months. The request was direct, polite, and entirely unyielding. Inside the palace, news travels faster through subtle glances than written memos. Within minutes, senior aides were quietly conferring in the side corridors, trying to assess how an ordinary arrangement had suddenly become the center of an official inquiry. Some advisors urged immediate discretion, suggesting that a quiet, retrofitted authorization would resolve the matter before it attracted unnecessary attention. They argued that family harmony required a degree of flexibility, especially when dealing with long-standing personal relationships. Others inside the household took a far more rigid view. They pointed out that estate rules exist precisely to prevent personal preferences from overriding institutional governance. If an exception could be made for one family member without going through formal channels, the entire structure of estate management would be compromised. The tension between tradition and convenience was no longer an abstract debate. It was now documented in cold black ink on the desk before them. Hi viewers, if you truly care about the integrity of the monarchy and want to support honest, deep-dive storytelling, that uncovers what really happens behind closed doors, subscribe right now. Leaving without subscribing means missing out on the critical details that others are afraid to cover, so hit that subscribe button immediately before we continue.
The country whose title I've been so greatly privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty. With Catherine beside him, our new Prince and Princess of Wales will, I know, continue to inspire and lead our national conversations, helping to bring the marginal to the centre ground.
As the afternoon light faded across the grounds, the paper trail only grew more confusing. Security logs showed vehicle entries that matched dates when the cottage was supposed to be vacant, according to official schedules. Keycard access records revealed that entry codes had been issued under a generic household clearance rather than a named individual permit. Every fresh piece of paper brought to the desk added another layer of questions. When an estate manager was summoned to clarify who had verbally authorized the key issue, the response was hesitant, citing a direct request from senior members of the general household. No single person wanted to take responsibility for bypassing the written protocol. Camilla viewed the entire matter as a harmless private family accommodation that required no grand bureaucratic interference. In her view, the guest cottage had stood empty, the visit was temporary, and family members had historically enjoyed a degree of personal latitude within private estate grounds. Raising formal objections over what amounted to a brief stay felt, to her supporters, like an unnecessary escalation over routine domestic flexibility. Yet from William's perspective, the issue was never about the physical presence of a guest in a cottage. It was about the precedent. The monarchy operates on rules that survive precisely because they are applied without personal favor. Allowing informal arrangements to bypass established oversight created a dangerous blur between private privilege and official estate governance. As more documents arrived, it became clear that this was not the first time routine paperwork had been deferred or quietly overlooked in favor of personal convenience. By early evening, the atmosphere inside the private office had shifted from cautious inquiry to quiet confrontation. Aides were instructed to prepare a formal summary of all estate access policies, outlining every departure from standard protocol over the preceding months. The air was thick with suspense as staff realized that what began as a routine administrative review was rapidly turning into an official line in the sand. Every employee who walked past the study door could feel the weight of the moment. Reports and memos were cross-referenced against security shift logs, leaving no room for assumptions or vague explanations. The paper trail was clear, precise, and completely unforgiving. Just as the final summary was being compiled into a confidential folder, a senior private secretary entered the room, holding a newly delivered encrypted message that had not gone through standard administrative sorting. The secretary placed the folder on the desk without saying a word, nodding once before stepping back toward the door. William opened the file, his eyes scanning the brief handwritten note attached to the front cover. The document contained details that went far beyond basic property logs or temporary guest visits, instantly shifting the entire disagreement onto dangerous new ground. With a single look at the final page, William reached for the desk phone, his fingers pressing the direct line numbers with absolute determination. The desk phone rang 3 times before the line connected, the harsh digital tone echoing off the wood-paneled walls of the quiet office. Outside, dusk had settled over the estate, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, while inside, senior aides stood completely motionless against the far wall. Prince William did not wait for a formal greeting. The moment the line clicked open, he demanded an immediate explanation for the undocumented security clearance codes issued to the guest cottage over the previous 3 weeks. Across the palace grounds, Queen Camilla stood near a tall window in her private sitting room, holding the receiver with tight fingers as the tone of the conversation turned instantly sharp. There was no polite small talk, no gentle softening of the message. Camilla maintained that the entire situation was being blown out of proportion over routine domestic hospitality, reminding him that the cottage was a private space meant for personal comfort rather than bureaucratic fights. But the argument fell on deaf ears. For William, the issue was never just about a guest staying in an empty cottage. It was about who held the actual authority to bypass protocol without consulting the future leadership of the estate.
Because for me, the most important thing in my life is family, and everything is about the future. And about if you don't start the children off now with a happy, healthy, stable home, I feel you're setting them up for a bit of a hard time and a fall.
If you are watching this and choosing to ignore the subscription button, you are turning your back on the only channel brave enough to tell you the unvarnished truth about what really happens behind palace walls. Skipping this channel means you prefer comfortable lies over uncomfortable reality. So smash that subscribe button right now, or accept that you are missing the real story forever. The tension inside the study was suffocating as the conversation deepened into a clash of wills. On one side of the line, a long-established way of doing things relied on quiet arrangements and personal influence behind closed doors. On the other side, a strict demand for accountability and modern governance left zero room for informal favors. Mid-level staff passing through the adjoining corridors could hear the low, measured intensity of William's voice through the heavy oak door. He was not asking for a retroactive fix, nor was he offering a compromise. He wanted every unauthorized keycard deactivated before midnight, and he wanted the guest estate cleared by morning. Camilla urged caution, warning that forcing an abrupt departure would spark intense media speculation and expose internal family fractures to a public that was already watching every move. She argued that a sudden removal would create a public spectacle out of a minor domestic choice, doing far more damage to the royal brand than any administrative error ever could. Rumors were already circulating among low-level estate staff, and any sudden movement at the guest cottage would inevitably attract the attention of reporters parked outside the perimeter gates. Yet the warning did not change the outcome. William viewed the threat of public speculation as secondary to the collapse of internal rules. If senior members could grant access without proper authorization, then the entire administrative structure was meaningless. Advisors standing near the desk exchanged nervous glances as the conversation reached its breaking point. The debate was no longer about property logs or visitor permits. It was about setting firm boundaries for how the institution would be managed moving forward. Every second of silence on the line felt like an eternity. Camilla argued that family loyalty required flexibility, especially during times of heavy public stress and health challenges within the core household. But William remained completely unyielding, stating that absolute adherence to protocol was the only thing protecting the monarchy from internal decay. The clash of priorities was total, leaving no middle ground for either side to fall back on. If you close this video right now without liking and subscribing, you are actively choosing to let key details stay buried in the dark, while others keep you misinformed. Subscribe right now to prove you actually care about real accountability, or accept that you are choosing ignorance over truth. The final moments of the call descended into a chilling stillness. Camilla made one last appeal to keep the matter private and settle it after the upcoming weekend engagements. William did not offer a verbal response to the request. Instead, he reached out, lifted the receiver, and slammed the phone down onto the cradle with a sudden, forceful strike that shattered the silence of the study. The sudden noise reverberated through the room, leaving the assembled aides standing in stunned silence. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The physical act of cutting off the call signaled a line had been crossed that could never be erased. Across the estate, Camilla lowered her phone, realizing that the informal arrangements of the past were officially over. Within 5 minutes of the disconnected call, William turned to the head of estate security and issued a direct order. The temporary access codes for the guest cottage were to be revoked immediately, and formal notice was to be delivered to the occupant before sunrise. The order was written, signed, and logged into the official record, leaving no room for reversal or delay. As the security chief departed to execute the command, a senior private secretary stepped forward to organize the remaining paperwork on the desk. The secretary looked at the stack of clearance forms, then at the closed door where the security detail had just exited. The officer leaned in slightly and whispered a single, devastating sentence to a colleague standing nearby. This was never really about the guest. Headlights sliced through the pitch-black darkness of the estate driveway as 2 black SUVs rolled to a sudden halt outside the guest cottage at 4 in the morning. The crunch of gravel under heavy tires shattered the early morning stillness, sending a shockwave through the sleeping residents. Estate security officers stepped out into the crisp night air, moving with military precision as they approached the front door with a formal notice in hand. There was no hesitation, no waiting for dawn, and no room for negotiation. Inside, lights flickered on one by one as the reality of the situation took hold. Queen Camilla's sister was handed an official directive revoking all temporary access permits with immediate effect, instructing her to vacate the property before the morning shift change. The sudden eviction unfolded in complete, eerie silence, stripped of all public drama but heavy with unspoken power. Outside the perimeter fence, freelance photographers who had been tipped off by estate rumors scrambled to position their long lenses, capturing distant, blurry silhouettes loading luggage into the back of a private vehicle. The images were fast, chaotic, and ambiguous, yet they immediately fueled intense media speculation across the internet. Speculation began to spread like wildfire that a massive family row had erupted, though palace officials maintained an absolute wall of silence, refusing to confirm or deny any rumored confrontation. If you are watching this right now and still haven't subscribed, you are actively choosing to let powerful institutions control what you know while you stay completely in the dark. Leaving without hitting that subscribe button means you simply don't care enough about uncovering the truth that others try so hard to hide. So click subscribe right now or admit you'd rather stay ignorant. By 7 in the morning, the cottage stood completely empty, its doors locked, and security access codes wiped from the central server. But inside the main administrative building, the real story was only just beginning to surface. Senior private secretaries were summoned to an emergency briefing room where a confidential blue folder lay unopened on the center of the mahogany table. This was not a document about guest logs, property boundaries, or temporary estate permits. It was a secret, long-range governance briefing prepared specifically for the future reign. As the pages were turned, the chilling reality behind the past 24 hours became painfully clear to everyone in the room. The entire dispute over the guest cottage had been a calculated test of authority. The briefing outlined a comprehensive blueprint for the future court, detailing strict new rules that would govern royal access, property usage, and administrative decisions once Prince William officially assumes ultimate leadership. The informal ways of the past, where personal favors and quiet family arrangements could bypass formal oversight, were explicitly scheduled for elimination. The guest stay had merely been the catalyst that exposed a deep, underlying struggle over who would hold true operational control during the ongoing transition of power. Camilla's attempt to extend informal hospitality had inadvertently collided with a pre-existing plan to assert complete institutional control over estate operations. William had used the administrative irregularity not out of sudden anger, but as a deliberate, decisive moment to set an unyielding precedent. Every detail in that confidential briefing revealed a future court built on absolute discipline and rigid protocol, leaving zero room for informal power structures or personal influence. The phone call, the slammed receiver, and the swift eviction were all calculated steps in a much larger strategy to reshape the royal household forever. If you walk away from this video right now without liking and subscribing, you are proving that you prefer shallow headlines over deep, uncomfortable truths. Do not let yourself be manipulated by sugar-coated narratives. Subscribe to this channel right this second to demand real accountability and ensure you never miss the vital pieces of the story that others are too afraid to show you. As the meeting concluded, senior advisors stepped out into the quiet courtyard, fully aware that the dynamics of the palace had permanently shifted. The line in the sand had been drawn in stone, and the era of quiet compromises behind closed doors had officially come to an end. A solitary paper shredder hummed in the basement of the estate administrative wing, swallowing the remaining draft memos from the previous night, before the morning shift even reported for duty. Dust particles danced in the harsh fluorescent light as the last physical evidence of the estate review vanished into thin strips of white paper. Upstairs, the quiet routine of the palace resumed, as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Servants laid out breakfast trays, security teams conducted standard perimeter sweeps, and press officers prepared generic daily schedules for public release. Yet behind that flawless, polished facade, the psychological atmosphere had irreversibly changed. The confidential briefing document that triggered the confrontation had not been destroyed. Instead, it was locked away inside a biometric safe in Prince William's private office, serving as the foundational blueprint for a whole new era of royal governance. What began as a local disagreement over an unapproved visitor in a guest cottage had exposed the inevitable friction of a monarchy in transition. For decades, the old guard relied on personal relationships, verbal agreements, and informal understandings to manage the delicate boundaries between family life and state duties. But those methods belonged to a different era. The future court would operate with cold, clinical discipline, where institutional rules superseded personal feelings without exception. Standing outside the locked entrance of the estate security office, the chief of security adjusted his collar in the damp morning air, staring down at an official operational directive that directly contradicted 30 years of established palace routine. The paper in his hands bore the unmistakable seal of the heir to the throne, demanding the immediate revocation of all non-standard access credentials issued across the property before the start of the next shift. For a man who had spent his entire career navigating the delicate, unwritten hierarchy of the royal household, the order placed him squarely in an impossible position. On one side stood the traditional authority of Queen Camilla, whose informal requests for family accommodations had always been honored without hesitation or bureaucratic friction. On the other side stood Prince William's unyielding command, backed by strict legal and operational guidelines that left zero room for personal deference. Inside the security monitoring room, banks of digital screens illuminated the dark space with cold blue light, tracking every vehicle movement, gate clearance, and keycard swipe across the vast perimeter. The shift supervisors sat in tense silence, waiting for their superior to make the call. For decades, the security detail operated on a system of implicit trust and quiet courtesy. If a senior member of the household requested a guest cottage be opened, or a security escort provided for a personal visitor, the officers complied smoothly, recording the event under general administrative clearance rather than raising formal inquiries. It was an unspoken code that kept domestic arrangements private and avoided unnecessary conflict between family members and institutional staff. Now, that long-standing culture of informal trust had collapsed in an instant. The security chief stepped inside the monitoring room, his face rigid as he approached the central console. The officers under his command knew every family member by name and had spent years protecting their privacy, but they were ultimately bound by written duty orders. To execute Prince William's command meant directly confronting Queen Camilla's household, revoking privileges that had been granted in good faith, and signaling to every officer on the force that the old ways of doing business were officially over. To delay or attempt a quiet compromise, however, meant risking a formal internal investigation for breach of protocol, putting his own career and the integrity of the entire security operation on the line. The chief placed his hands on the edge of the control desk, staring at the flashing red status indicator for the guest cottage gate. He knew that every action taken over the next 10 minutes would be permanently recorded in immutable digital logs, visible to senior administrative officers during the morning review. There was no middle ground left to occupy. The delicate balance between personal loyalty to the Queen and strict obedience to the future monarch had completely snapped, forcing the veteran security chief to make a choice that would permanently alter his standing within the palace walls. With a heavy breath and a steady voice, he leaned over the console, looked his lead officer in the eye, and issued the order to shut down the access credentials immediately. Deep in the climate-controlled vaults beneath the administrative wing, the heavy steel door swung open, exposing rows of floor-to-ceiling archive shelves that had remained untouched for years. Two senior auditors, accompanied by a quiet administrative secretary, stepped into the dust-moated room, carrying digital scanners and blank ledger files. The directive issued from the private office was clear, comprehensive, and entirely unprecedented. Every physical guest record, key allocation log, and estate authorization ledger stretching back across the previous 3 decades was to be systematically audited. What began as an isolated dispute over a single guest cottage was now expanding into a full-scale historical sweep of palace operations. The heavy leather-bound books were pulled from the shelves one by one, their yellowed pages documenting decades of informal royal governance. Under the old system, verbal approvals and handwritten notes from private secretaries were routinely accepted as sufficient authorization for property access, utility allocations, and security clearances. Personal friends, distant relatives, and favored guests had moved through the estate residences under a veil of quiet courtesy, leaving behind incomplete paperwork and vague entries in the master property logs. The auditors worked in complete silence, their overhead scanners emitting sharp, rhythmic beeps that echoed through the stone vault as each page was digitized and cross-referenced against central financial records. As the audit progressed into the late hours of the night, clear patterns began to emerge from the dusty pages. Discrepancies were highlighted in bright yellow digital ink, exposing dozens of instances where estate resources had been quietly allocated without formal oversight or clear administrative boundaries. Rooms marked as vacant in official public reports had drawn water and electricity for months at a time. Security details had been assigned to private visitors without corresponding clearance documentation from the Estate Oversight Board. The paper trail revealed a long-standing culture of informal privilege where personal influence routinely bypassed written rules, creating an unaccounted-for footprint that left the entire institution exposed to potential regulatory scrutiny. By the time the final shelf was cleared, the auditors had compiled a massive digital file detailing 30 years of unwritten accommodations. Every entry represented a potential liability, a breach of modern compliance standards, and a direct contradiction of the transparent governance model Prince William was determined to enforce. The completed report was locked into a single encrypted drive, destined for the desk of the private secretary before dawn. The historical audit had successfully transformed a simple administrative inquiry into an unassailable dossier, providing the ultimate justification for dismantling the informal power structures of the past once and for all. In the grey light of early dawn, an unmarked maintenance van pulled into the inner courtyard, its arrival unannounced on the daily estate schedule. Inside the main administrative corridors, a specialized team of contractors moved with silent efficiency, carrying heavy equipment cases and rolls of wiring. The project underway was not a routine repair, but a complete structural realignment of the physical spaces that governed palace operations. Overnight, the quiet, decentralized offices that had managed estate affairs for decades were being physically reconfigured to eliminate every trace of informal authority. Across the ground floor, traditional brass locks on private study doors were unceremoniously removed and replaced with modern, biometric access scanners. Keycard entry points that had previously granted broad, unrestricted movement across the administrative wing were reprogrammed from a central server, suddenly restricting access strictly by rank and duty assignment. Where staff members once moved freely between offices to trade verbal requests and coordinate informal favors, glass security partitions and monitored access doors now enforced a rigid, traceable boundary. The most dramatic physical transformation took place inside the central administration suite. Desks that had belonged to independent household secretaries were cleared, rearranged, and consolidated into a single, open-plan oversight hub. The private side offices where senior aides once held unrecorded meetings were converted into locked filing rooms, stripping secondary household staff of their isolated pockets of influence. Wall-mounted communication lines were rerouted to ensure every internal call passed through a central digital switchboard, creating an undeniable, permanent record of every internal inquiry. By 7 in the morning, as the first regular staff members arrived for their shifts, they stepped into an environment that looked familiar on the surface, but functioned under entirely new, clinical rules. The physical spaces now reflected the strict, unyielding philosophy of the future court. The comfortable corners and private alcoves that had enabled decades of quiet, unwritten arrangements were gone, replaced by a modern, transparent architecture designed to ensure that no decision could ever again be made in the shadows. If you turn off this video right now without subscribing, you are choosing to stay blind while the world shifts around you. Thousands of people will walk away today knowing the real truth about how power is claimed behind palace walls, while you choose to remain in the dark, fed on superficial PR stories that tell you nothing. Subscribe immediately, or accept that you are content being left behind while others see through the illusion. Every member of the household staff understood the silent message that had been sent across the estate. The abrupt phone call and the 4 in the morning exit were not acts of emotional impulse. They were deliberate, calculated markers of authority. Queen Camilla's influence within the administrative machinery had met a firm, immovable boundary, signaling that the future monarch was already steering the institution with an unyielding hand. Speculation among royal observers continues to circulate about how deep these private fractures really run, with commentators weighing whether these events signal an ongoing power struggle or simply the natural, necessary evolution of modern crown management. While rumors continue to swirl in media outlets, the official stance from palace representatives remains completely unchanged, maintaining that all senior royals operate in full alignment on estate management and protocol. Yet those who walk the quiet corridors know that the line has been drawn permanently. The informal privileges of the past have been revoked, replaced by a strict standard of operational control that leaves zero room for compromise. Every decision, every permit, and every guest list will now pass through a single, uncompromising filter designed to protect the integrity of the future reign at all costs. If you leave this channel right now without hitting that subscribe button and liking this video, you are voluntarily walking away from the truth. You are telling yourself that staying uninformed is easier than facing how power really operates. Smash that subscribe button right now to hold these stories accountable, or admit to yourself that you would rather live in comfortable ignorance. The true impact of this quiet shift is only beginning to ripple through the higher ranks of the royal household. Behind closed doors, an entirely new file has just been opened on the desk of senior estate officials, containing a handwritten ledger that was uncovered during the security audit. This document details a decades-old hidden property agreement that involves King Charles himself, containing an undisclosed clause that could completely shatter the delicate alliance between the monarch and his heir. You cannot afford to miss our next episode, where we expose the exact contents of that secret file and reveal the shocking compromise King Charles made behind closed doors that threatens to upend the entire future of the British monarchy.